Hi, I'm Layla Mullo. I'm one of the presenters today. I'm a first-year master's in public policy student, and I want to thank all the candidates again for joining our class.
Hi, my name is Juan Jaimes. I am a second-year MPP student as well.
My name is Megan Clarick, and I'm also a second-year MPP student. And I think we're going to start off by just allowing each of you to start up with just a 1-minute introduction. And tell us why you're running.
I assume we're starting at this end. Can you hear me? Now can you hear me? Okay. First, I want to thank the School of Public Policy for inviting us to this event so that we can discuss local issues. My name is Jack Eaton. I currently represent the 4th Ward on City Council. I love our city. It's a special place with unique features. It's been my pleasure to represent the 4th Ward on City Council. I'm running for mayor to fight for those ordinary citizens who don't have the wealth and power that many people bring to the table when they try to influence government. I believe that we need to speak for every resident in town. I've spent my legal career representing unions and their members, not corporations, and I believe that the role of government is to level the playing field so that not just the wealthy and the powerful have a voice at the table, but that all of us do. So I hope to answer your questions today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Questions for all candidates. What is the best way to increase the availability of affordable housing in Ann Arbor? Do you think the city should enact the affordable housing plan to increase economic diversity in Ann Arbor? And we can.
Thank you. This is an excellent question, and we could spend the remainder of our time on this one subject. I think that what makes affordable housing a difficult issue is that not everybody defines affordability in the same way. Are we trying to address just the poorest individuals in town? We do a fairly good job of that. We receive HUD money and pass it through Section 8 subsidies, and we kind of address that. But in reality, in Ann Arbor, affordability is a spectrum of need. Ann Arbor is becoming unaffordable for a police officer or a teacher or an employee of the University of Michigan. So we have a really complex issue that extends across a whole spectrum of incomes. One of the issues I hear most frequently when I campaign is people who have been in a house for 30 years or more can't afford the taxes and fees that the city imposes on them. They're being priced out of their house. And so, you know, this is one of the difficulties. We have to recognize that building alone will not solve the affordability problem. If that were true, both Austin, Texas and Portland, Oregon would have solved this a long time ago, and they haven't. In fact, all of the building that they've done has actually increased the disparity in income. It's increased the unaffordability of housing, and they just have massive homeless populations. So this isn't an easy problem, but if we're going to address it, we're going to need the trust of our residents, and we're only going to earn that trust if, in fact, we've already provided the basic services and the basic infrastructure and proved that we can do what a city should do before we engage in experimenting on affordable housing.
So it's a little longer question, so bear with me real quick. So for all candidates again, in your opinion, is the city of Ann Arbor doing enough to protect residents from federal immigration enforcement? What changes would you propose? Do you believe that the city should join other municipalities and states to oppose the Trump administration's census question regarding citizenship status?
How's that? So I'm glad to take this question. I'm really sad that we live in a time when we have to ask this question. It's really unfortunate that our federal government has turned on our residents. Ann Arbor hosts a world-class university, and we have to be a welcoming city so that students and faculty and others feel free to come to our town and engage in the educational process that we have. We attract people from all over the world, and we cannot be a part of what the federal government does. I'm proud to have sponsored the Ann Arbor City Ordinance that prohibits our staff from inquiring about immigrant status. We've taken other measures to make clear that we are not going to participate in federal immigration enforcement. I think that we probably all here agree that that's not our role as a local government. We haven't become what's called a sanctuary city because, in fact, you just draw attention to yourself, and it accomplishes almost nothing more than our immigrant status ordinance has accomplished. We're just not going to participate in what the federal government is doing to our residents. I was also proud to sponsor a resolution seeking the expungement of a minor criminal offense from an immigrant's record so that he could remain in Michigan. We were successful on that. We convinced the state government to expunge his record. He's been allowed to stay, and that was with the full support of our city council. So I'm glad to serve with people who share those values.
Okay, so this next question is only for the mayoral candidates, so everyone else gets a little bit of a break. How do you see the police review board developing? Specifically, what role do you want to see it play in the future? And what more should the city be doing to ensure that all communities feel safe and have a positive relationship with the police department?
Thank you. This is an excellent question. I've been working with members of the Human Rights Commission and members of a community organization called Transforming Justice Washtenaw on the issues that arise around a police review process. For me, the process has to be fully independent of the police department. You cannot have police officers reviewing their own conduct. A review process has to be fully empowered. You can't hobble the process by not giving full access of information and witnesses and videotape or whatever it be to this group. It has to be citizen-driven. We need to make sure that the process gives the community trust in our police. I think that the basic distinction between camps on this particular issue is just how fully authorized and independent the final review board will be. My work with Transforming Justice Washtenaw has led me to believe that anything less than full authorization is just an action for appearances and not for actual change. The review board needs to have the ability also to review policies and practices to make sure that all of the police practices that we have in place comport with best practices industry-wide. I want to point out that the U of M has had a review board for a long time, and the city of Ann Arbor should be embarrassed that we don't already have one, and we should be embarrassed if we form one that isn't fully empowered. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to switch topics and move on to transit. And you can take this question, and this is for all candidates. How do you plan to implement multimodal transit? Particularly, do you believe that a transit plan should include Washtenaw and Wayne counties moving forward with the regional transit system?
Thank you. Again, a good question. Ann Arbor has a transit authority. It is independently funded, separate from the tax revenues that the city collects for its own operation. And they should be at the forefront of our planning on transit. If, in fact, the state legislature comes forward with a plan that's regionalized so that we're included in a good plan for a multi-jurisdictional area, I would take a close look at it. But the fundamental problem really isn't the geographic area that our transit plans touch on. It's actually the funding method. I've spent a career representing transit worker unions. At one point in time, I was actually a bus driver. I'm quite familiar with transportation issues. And the transit issue that Southeast Michigan has is how do we provide local funding that's adequate for the transit needs that we have. The Regional Transit Authority idea was not effective on that point. It would provide new services that link communities. At the same time, it ignores those who are transit dependent in areas like Detroit and Ypsilanti. We first have to address those who are most reliant on transit and make sure that they can reach the destinations they need to go to in their own community. And if you're relying on a hodgepodge of different funding mechanisms, so Detroit uses general city revenues to fund its transit, the suburbs use a dedicated millage, and then Ann Arbor has its own millage. These different methods of funding it are part of the reason we have ineffective regional transit.
So, what role have donations to your campaigns played in the development of your positions? And what are the city's specific goals for the Y lot if the city were to purchase it?
Well, I assume this question was asked because I'm on the panel, because I've received I've received contributions from Dennis Dahlman, and that's who we're litigating over the fate of the Y lot. I would point out that when Dennis Dahlman submitted the highest bid to purchase this property, and some of us voted to accept the high bid, we were criticized for that vote because we had received contributions in the past from him. So apparently anything that we do with regard to Mr. Dahlman is subject to criticism, even if it makes complete rational sense, taking the high bid. We have to look at the history of this property. In 2003, the Y put this property up for sale, and the city intervened and bought it. We shouldn't have bought it. It should have been allowed to be sold to the Transit Authority so they could expand their transit center downtown, but we intervened in an attempt to protect some affordable housing that was in that building. Pretty soon thereafter, we realized the building really wasn't fit to be kept. We tore it down and we put it on the market, and agreed to develop it through a particular developer. That, like this deal, that deal fell through and we were sued. And even though the city completely prevailed in the litigation on that first project, it took 5 years before it was concluded. We prevailed without any qualification, but it still took this property out of development for 5 years. Here we are again facing litigation that's likely to take multiple years, and nothing will happen during that litigation. And so I believe that we should be trying to work with that developer to come to a reasonable settlement rather than tying up this property and making it inactive for another 2 or more years. So I believe that there's a rational basis for my decision, completely independent of where I get my contributions, but I appreciate the question.
Okay, we have one last question, and this is from the audience. It says, thank you for coming to speak today. I am a representative of Washtenaw Youth Initiative, an organization devoted to decreasing gun violence and increasing access to mental health resources. In the wake of low counselor-to-student ratios, children having heightened access to guns, and Congress cutting funding to education and mental health, how do you plan to support the youth of Ann Arbor in the pursuit of safe education?
Put simply, For generations, we've failed to address our gun problem. I'm just really so proud of the young people who are taking this issue on and insisting that we do something about gun violence in schools. We should be ashamed for our failure to have addressed it, but I support, especially these high school kids. They're just so brave to step up and demand that something be done. I think as a council, we have shown our support for the Ann Arbor Public Schools' desire to keep guns out of the classroom. I would continue to do that. It's important that we look for reasonable ways to address the access to guns by people who shouldn't have them. With regard to mental health, recently the county passed a mental health millage. In Ann Arbor, we'll collect about $5 million, but because we have our own police department, $2 million of that's collected for mental health and public safety will be returned to the city, and we're going to use it on a variety of issues that are unrelated to mental health. I oppose that misuse of the mental health and public safety money because we should be taking care of the problems that we have in this community with those funds. It would be nice to be able to address all of the wonderful things we want to do with those monies, but those monies are being collected under the guise of mental health and public safety, and this is exactly what this question is about. So I would support accepting those funds from the county millage and using them to address mental health problems, to address our opioid problems, which I really consider to be mental health problems, to address public safety problems such as the human trafficking and prostitution problem that runs rampant but silent in this community, instead of misusing those monies.